9:15 here on the morning show with Jeff and Will. It's AM 1700 WRCR Haverstraw, WRCR.com. Welcome, everybody. And if you got a business-related question, you might want to stick to the phone and give us a call, because Tina Traster joins us now from the Rockland County Business Journal, and she's got the pulse of Rockland business in her veins. Good morning, Tina. How are you?
Good morning. I love that intro. Happy Martin Luther King Jr.'s Day.
Thank you. Same to you and yours.
Everybody. Welcome to law school. We're going to talk about two really complicated cases, each of which is playing out on two fronts. Let's start with the Rockland Cider Works cidery. We reported on that last week, and but there's more. There's more. So a second order was issued later last week by a Rockland County Supreme Court judge that just may be the last nail in the coffin of the Rockland Cider Works, at least as a place to go and have a drink and sit and sort of listen to music. Before I explain this, let me give you a little bit of history so people understand this case, in case they haven't been following. The cidery operates on Sickletown Road at the Van Houten farm stand, which the cidery's been this iteration of the cidery has been operating since 2019 and had been wrangling with the town of Orangetown over some work that it did not have permits for, and more importantly, because the town said that the cidery operation was not legal in the zone where the farm stand was operated. Nevertheless, the cidery disagreed. They continued to operate. They sued the town of Orangetown, and initially the court did grant the cidery a temporary injunction, which effectively let it stay open and operate while the case was winding its way through the court. Now, meanwhile, so that was happening on one front. Meanwhile, neighbors of the cidery were complaining to the town, and the town took no action. So the neighbors filed their own case under a law that allows a minimum of 3 taxpayers who live in the same zone to sue if the town doesn't enforce its own zoning code. That's an interesting law because I guess oftentimes neighbors are frustrated with a commercial business and they feel like they don't get relief, say, at a town, and they do have some recourse. So the week before last, the previous story that we published, and actually I think I was speaking about last week on the radio, and this was the first blow. In that case, the court dismissed the cidery's case against the town, saying that the cidery, in fact, should have gone to the ZBA instead of the Zoning Board of Appeals, instead of to the court. And by dismissing the case, it also lifted that injunction that I just mentioned that had allowed it to operate while the case was pending. So with no court protection, what happens next presumably was going to be in the hands of the town. You know, would they close them down? Would they allow them to continue? Would they try to negotiate something, kind of thread the needle, figure out a variance or a zone change? We weren't sure. We were waiting for the next episode of this drama. But it turns out that the cudgel came down last week with the second decision, because in the second decision, let's call this now the neighbor's case, that same judge decided to dismiss the case. The same judge that dismissed the case against the town gave the neighbors a leg up when he gave them what's called temporary injunction, which effectively means that he's closed down the cidery, at least temporarily, saying that the cidery, buying into their argument that the cidery was a nuisance that was devaluing their property values. The neighbors were complaining that the cidery was creating, noise and traffic on the road and and devaluing their properties. Now, the cidery itself has been there for eons and has been a commercial operation, as a nursery for a very long time, and had back in August when we wrote about them said that they had amended some of the problems, meaning they had created parking on site and they had discontinued the loud music. But nevertheless, the The neighbors had an appraiser say that their property values had been harmed. So the cidery effectively will close down, but there is one catch, and that is that the neighbors have to come up with a bond to cover the cidery's losses if the neighbors ultimately lose the case. So if the cidery shows, what it will lose in terms of revenue or profits, will the neighbors post a bond to cover that? That's a question mark that we will probably see the answer to on a hearing later this month when that bond amount is decided. And these neighbors are going to have to, come up with some percentage of that bond amount in order to, while the rest of the case winds through. Now, if the cidery feels defeated and closes down because they can't take it anymore, then that will be moot. But if the cidery continues to either fight or try to negotiate something with the town, then all of this remains, an ongoing and live situation. Bottom line, pretty complicated, but I hope that I've broken that down in pieces that were digestible. Any questions, comments?
Yeah. I'm just curious, where do you think this ends up, though, after all that?
Well, sadly, I think that for a small startup business in a cottage industry, cideries, that has been fighting on two fronts for 2 years, and also a business that has a second location upstate, I don't want to say that they necessarily fold, but I think that, let's say they wanted to give it a Hail Mary. I think what they have to do is try to negotiate something with the town of Orangetown that would make sense in terms of zoning. There has to be maybe something ironed out where it's either a variance or a zone change or something that allows them to continue this operation. I will say aside, and maybe this is just kind of a bias, but I think that this was the sort of business that was generally a plus for the community. We, as a community, this past week we covered the tourism awards that the county meted out to almost 30 different entities that are promoting tourism in the county, and I think having a cidery in the county is an asset. There might be some talk about the Davies Farm trying to do something maybe on a small scale like this, but
Davies Farm isn't really in a residential neighborhood though, like the Van Houten Farm is though.
Right, that's true, and so maybe they'll have a better setup, but these guys understood the value of pulling together cider, hard cider, and a little bit of music and tables. I mean, if you've ever been there, it's not a big operation, and it's a very pleasant setting. I've
been there when it operates as a farm, and they sell farm things, but I mean, I've never been there as the cidery, no.
Well, I don't know. I'm not even sure if they're open right now, but I know that I have been there, and it was the sort of thing where you say, oh, this is a nice thing for Rockland County.
But you don't live there.
Right. But if you that's true. That's true. I don't live there. The question is, the owners said that they did try to cure the problems, which was to say that they put the parking on site rather than having the parking lining up on the main street, which can definitely be a nuisance for residents. And that if there's music that's pounding on at a certain hour of the night, that's unacceptable. I mean, I understand that nobody wants that sort of interference with their homes, but I don't know. I guess in the bottom line is that this there are legal issues here, and the cidery needed to. I guess the judge is ultimately saying the cidery needed to go down that path. Orangetown, kind of, sort of stayed passive around this too, and they kind of let the mess fester. So, enough blame all around. it's just, I think it's just kind of, I guess this is just a personal assessment that the Van Houten Farms has been a commercial operation for decades. So it's not like these neighbors suddenly found themselves next door to a commercial operation.
No, but they were next to a farm, and and now they're next to a bar, basically. I mean, so I can understand their plight.
Yeah,
and for the record, I don't live in that area. I mean, I live in Orangetown, but I don't live in that area.
I don't live in that area either, and I don't know what it really was like day to day. Could it have been sorted through? I don't know. Maybe. It seems like a lot of mistakes were made all around, and I guess the bottom line is, in the end of the day, if we lose a cidery, then I think that we lose an asset. That's all I'm saying. Maybe it wasn't the right place. Maybe it wasn't handled correctly. I think that everybody could probably agree to all of those things. But the net loss is a business, and the net loss is an interesting business, and one that offered something in Rockland that we don't otherwise have.
True. Before we go on, if you don't mind, we do have a caller who has a question for you, so we're going to go to the phones.
Okay.
And welcome in, Marion. Good morning, Marion.
Good morning, yeah. Hi, Miss Traska. I wanted to know if the people who bought homes there, of course they didn't expect a bar, like a bar. I wasn't aware that was a bar noise. And of course that has reason to go to complaints. But if you go to buy a home, don't you ride around the neighborhood and see a big nursery and think, gee, I'm in a commercial kind of area? Or the other thing is, if the patrons at this bar with the loud music, say at 9, 10 o'clock, 9 o'clock, whatever the hour would be to make it quiet, why don't those people go and drink somewhere else where you could stay out later?
Yeah, they initially they had music going on, in the evening, but then they cut that off.
Oh.
When they recognized that was a complaint, they understood that they were under pressure, and they were responsive. When they realized. Yeah, so I think the music stopped by 6, 7 o'clock in the evenings, and then at a certain point, I think that they actually stopped the live music, and they just had some, like canned music. So I don't really know, how disruptive this really was to these neighbors, but they say that it was, and they claim that it was affecting their property prices. So
generally, and also in particular, Van Houten is a very good, reputable business name in this county, and they've been around, as you say, for a long time. And I'm sure they were very cooperative, and they did not want to be harmful, because nursery people at large and farm people are very good people. They're never like cruel and, we don't care. We're going to, like some bars, they don't care. They keep doing it.
This was not like a bar downtown in Nyack that was, that had, I don't think that's what was really happening.
And I'm sorry, we got to cut this. I'm sorry, Marion. I'm sorry, we got to cut this off because we have a show coming up next.
Music around this area. Bye.
Bye. Thanks, Marion. And Tina, thank you for joining us as always. If anyone has questions or other concerns or wants to read the latest about this and other issues, they can go to rcbizjournal.com. Tina, thank you so much.
All right. I was going to talk about a second issue, so I just want to call people's attention to also a brouhaha that's going on around the Clarkstown term limits, and also two different fighting that's going on two different fronts. But they can read about that in Rockland County Business Journal.
Absolutely. rcbizjournal.com. Thanks, Tina. Have a great